Good evening, Jason here. I am coming at you from the basement of the farmhouse and the office down here. Definitely a very different video this evening, but I had promised some of you a follow-up to the situation with the heifer calf that we lost a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And I went ahead and did a soil sample, sent that into a lab, and we also had a forage analysis done. And so we have those results back, and I am pretty intrigued. I'm not going to go over everything that happened with the heifer. I'll see if I can link to that video in case you're just tuning in and don't know the story. One mistake we did make on the soil test, we had a lab called Dairy One do the test out of New York. And I did that. I had heard good things about them, and as it turns out, you have these tests done, and then you get a bunch of numbers via email. And I'm opening this up, and there's no recommendations, and I'm like, okay, So I call them, and a rep calls me back, and he's like, oh, well, you're in Ohio, and he said we do recommendations for New York, state of New York, and okay. So I went with them because we may have some milk testing done for our milk cow through Dairy One later on. But I was happy with them as a company, pretty quick turnaround. And I'm going to try and keep this quick and not boring. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the soil test. Our numbers pretty much came in within range, 6.5 pH, organic matter's up over 3%. I think it's important to kind of delineate or talk about the difference between the soil test and the forage test. Soil is, I think of the soil test as just a lot more permanent, right? Your forage test is going to tell you kind of what's going on with your grasses, your pasture at a certain time, kind of a snapshot. And that can change big time from season to season. Your soil test is going to be, in my mind, quite a bit more stationary. You say permanent maybe, but it can be changed. But going over our soil test, there was nothing that was really out of range, which surprised me because with grass tetany, I'm kind of thinking, okay, maybe we show that in the forage analysis, but maybe that shows up as well in the numbers here on the soil test, and it didn't. Our magnesium levels look good in the soil, so do calcium, potassium. I will say this, phosphorus was a little bit low. And so there is a school of thought that perhaps when phosphorus gets low, it can tie up magnesium. But, worth noting too, I did submit these tests to Fertrell, the nutritionist at Fertrell, looked these over, and she did say the way that they did the test here on the soil test was a modified Morgan, and she said that that's actually an outdated way of doing things. So she's recommending another lab. We may have this tested again. She said that phosphorus number, it could be higher than is stated on this test because of that modified Morgan. So if you have a soil test done, don't do modified Morgan. Here, let's just skip straight to the forage analysis. And again, we're having these tests done to see if we can glean any more information about our situation with the heifer, which was grass tetany. That's kind of what we're looking for. So what I did was I went out, the kids and I, and we took 20 different samples. So we sampled in 20 spots. I had the kiddos stand in a line with me. Everybody had scissors, and we cut, 4 of us cut, and we did that, and then we'd go down the paddock, cut again, cut again, cut again. We did that 5 times. So we got 20 different samples, mixed those in a bucket, and then basically picked a pound sample out of that, a representative sample. Taking a look at this report here, there's basically 2 different columns when you get a forage test report here. There's as fed and there's dry matter. So 2 different columns. As fed is going to be just as it is. You can see there the percent moisture of our as fed is like almost 81%. So it's mostly moisture as fed. Moisture samples can vary greatly. And so we want a uniform comparison. So typically with these tests, you look at that dry matter column. That's what we're going to pay attention to here. Let's take a look at crude protein. And our crude protein on our test here was 24.2. That's pretty high. And it doesn't surprise me with these pastures being so lush. But Penn State did an interesting article called Protein in Pastures, Can It Be Too High? It's worth checking out, but they're recommending 16 to 18% crude protein, saying, 25% or higher really is too high. I'm talking about something called MUN, milk, urea, nitrogen. I guess there's a milk loss, or there can be when your protein gets too high. So is 24 here too high? Well, we've talked about this before, but one thing I like to do is keep an eye on manure and the consistency of the manure. And, if I see scouring, then that's telling me that green material is moving through too fast and we need to slow it down. So we'll just very simply put some hay out. That's a good way to kind of balance this. But, definitely seeing that protein number elevated here with these green lush grasses. ADF, NDF. NDF is neutral detergent fiber, ADF acid detergent fiber. TDN is total digestible nutrients. The greater the value, the more energy dense the forage is. We were sitting at 62%. Basically, low quality hay is going to be anywhere from 45 to 52%. Mid quality hay, 52 to 58%. High quality hay, typically greater than 58%. And again, I'm looking at 62 for us. A dry cow needs a minimum of 48% TDN. Lactating cow needs at least 60%. So our 62 number should be sufficient. And we do have Daisy out there who is still nursing. So she should be getting what she needs off of this paddock anyway. RFV, if you go down and look at RFV there, RFV is relative feed value. Now, this is not the same as RFQ. Some tests show RFQ. That's relative forage quality. RFV is calculated from ADF and NDF and gives the overall quality of the forage sample in one number. The scale varies above and below 100. Basically, 100 is going to represent an alfalfa forage at 100% bloom. So anything above 100 is considered higher quality forage than alfalfa at full maturity. We're at 110. I'm tickled pink about that, to be honest, especially since grasses are typically undervalued when you look at RFV. Minerals, going down to minerals here. We've got trace minerals and macro minerals. Typically, your trace minerals are expressed in parts per million, and your macro are expressed as a percentage. Looking at those, we'll get to those in just a second here. We did have a nitrate nitrogen test done. We lost a few sheep. It was a year ago. We thought maybe it was high nitrates. Our well out there in the pasture, the windmill well, it did test higher. We had that tested, that water. It did test higher for nitrates, so I wanted this test done. And, looking at these numbers that came back on the test, were absolutely fine. Not even close to being dangerous there. But here's where it really gets interesting, and here's kind of what I wanted to spend the majority of the time talking about regarding this data here, and that is grass tetany. Cool season grasses are known, we've talked about this in the other video, to not only be low in magnesium but high in potassium. When blood magnesium concentration gets too low, hypomagnesemia, I believe is how you say that, and that's just clinical signs of tetany. Stiffness start to present due to the role of magnesium in stopping muscle stimulation. Ruminant animals are unique in regards to grass tetany. Calcium also plays a role in its relation to magnesium here. We talked about that. So we went over that equation, potassium over calcium plus magnesium. Anytime this ratio exceeds 2.2, your animals are at risk for grass tetany. So this is interesting. We can take these numbers here on the forage test from paddock 3, and we can run them through this equation. Now, we have to convert percent dry matter to milli equivalence basis for the equation to be useful. In other words, you can't just take the numbers that are on the test. Basically, you have to adjust those numbers for molecular weight. And so we're taking percent dry matter for these nutrients, minerals, and we are multiplying potassium by 25.64, calcium by 49.88, and magnesium by 82.24. Then we're going to run that equation. And it's interesting, when we do this, when we take those numbers and put them through this equation, adjusting for molecular weight, I come up with 2.32. And again, anything higher than 2.2, you're at risk for grass tetany. So, looking at this, I'm pretty confident in saying this confirms what we were dealing with, what we thought we were dealing with. Obviously I had the conversation with the vet as well, but it's just nice. You don't always get this luxury to know what it is that you're dealing with, and the advantage to knowing, right, is then we can take steps to correct. And so where do we go from here? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound to cure. Was it Ben Franklin, I think? That's absolutely applicable here. I do not want to be trying to treat this again ever, obviously. So what are our prevention options, basically, is the question. We've gone over some of that, but, several options. Adding magnesium is important. We can add it to the water. Went over some of this with Fertrell when I contacted them, and the nutritionist there said, yeah, you can put the magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts in the water. That will work, but it's not real palatable, so you risk that the animals won't drink. We tried that for a while until I could get my new mineral in, and it's kind of funny. Worked for about a week, and then I noticed the cattle out there started using their nose, their head, and they would tip the water up to where the water would run over the side. Now it's hooked up to the elevated tank, so it would continue to run and run and run until it drains the tanks, but that gets their water flushed out. So they know what they're doing. But that is an option. You can add it to the water. You can use a mineral mix with at least 5% magnesium is what they're recommending. That's what we're doing. We put that out today. We're going with a sheep NutriBalancer. Now you say, well, they're cattle. Why are you putting out a sheep mineral? Well, we run cattle and sheep together, and so it's very important. Originally, we were given the recommendation just put out Grazer's Choice cattle mineral for the cattle. It's got high mag. You'll be fine. Well, running sheep and cattle together, the cattle mineral has too much copper, and so copper can be toxic to sheep. So we basically are finding a mineral that works for both cattle and sheep, and that happens to be Fertrell's Sheep NutriBalancer, 8% magnesium. So that's another option, just getting your mineral ration right. That can be tough, though, because what if your animals, for some reason, don't hit the mineral? What if they don't go over there? You're not certain that they're going to get it. And so I think we will, during the times of the year where we have the green ups, I think we will continue to add the Epsom salts to the water, just so I can make sure they're getting a baseline, but also keeping that 8% mineral out. And then I think another option is you can let the grass continue to grow higher. Right? As the grass grows higher, you're going to put on more stems, stemmy material, increase that fiber, which is most likely going to decrease your potassium. And remembering that equation, if you decrease potassium, that will also decrease that tetany risk. So, what do we take away from this? The one thing that just really stands out to me is the resiliency of our cattle. I just cannot talk highly enough of this Red Devon breed. Yeah, we lost one, but I didn't treat any of the other cattle that day that we were dealing with problems. And so I think back to that, what we were using before for our mineral ration, and it's like below 1% magnesium. So these cattle that we've had here on this ground for over 2 years now have not only survived, but they've thrived here, even with a magnesium deficiency. And to me, that just speaks to the hardiness to the breed. I mean, we've continued to calve. We've had 2 calves born here out of 2 separate cows, and they have the unassisted births. Just cannot speak highly enough to this Devon breed. They're slower growing, sure, but I just think about, like, if we would have gone with some of those more, like, I call them race car breeds of cattle, right? Your Angus and your Herefords, the kind of cattle that you can get to market in 15, 18 months with grain. I think the stakes would have been a lot higher, and we would have had quite a few more losses. So I am going to put a plug in for these Devon cattle, especially if you're just a small homestead, looking for an animal to start out with. Pretty good way to, I think, start out with cattle and learn. Going to be pretty resilient. At least they have been here. Having this test definitely lets us know what's going on. So I hope you guys are having a good night, and have a good weekend. Take care.